What am I talking about? I'm talking about striking. Well, I'm going to give you my 4-stage process that I've done with lots and lots of golfers over the years. It's really helped them understand striking, develop better strike in their golf game. Do you know what? It's actually really quite simple to do. If you follow these 4 steps, you will start to strike it better. So the first thing I always like to do with golfers is really just give them a clear concept of how setup is very different to impact, and how the two feel and how they look when you're over the golf ball. This is a great little exercise, and the good thing with this is you don't have to be at a golf course to do this. You can just be anywhere at home. Take a setup. And this is my normal 7-iron setup where I've got a little bit more weight into my lead side. I've got the board just forward of centre. I've got my feet about shoulder width apart. You can see that I've got my hands a little bit ahead of the club head. This would be my setup position. Now, if you ask me to move the club head towards the target, it's going to move in that direction. There's nothing to stop it. There's no resistance there. Remember, that's my setup. So this, I would like you to move into your impact position. You're going to keep your head pretty much in the same place. I don't really want to move that. But you're going to take your hips and you're going to push your weight over onto your lead side. You can see as I do that, my hips move laterally towards the target. Then I'm going to take my hands, I'm going to push those forwards. So you can see that the grip of the club is over the inside of my lead thigh. I've now got a lot more shaft lean at this point. And then I'm going to take my midsection, so my kind of hips, my thighs, a little bit of my torso, and I'm going to add a little bit of rotation towards the target. Now, for each of you, you're going to have a different amount of rotation. Some will have more, some will have less. But once you've done that, and I'm keeping a little bit of bend in my trail arm, this is now my impact position. Very, very different to where my setup was. And you're going to feel that straight away. Now, if you ask me to move the club head towards the target, guess what? It's different. The ground is now in the way. I'm not trying to physically hit down or push the club down. It's just the nature of my body position meant that my hands are now forwards and there is some resistance from the ground. So I'm now using the index finger on my trail hand and that knuckle to put some pressure on the back of the shaft, and I feel like that golf club is bending. This is me putting pressure through the club shaft, through the club head on what would be the golf ball, but obviously it's the ground at this point. And if I had speed at this point, the club would be going into the ground, which is why so many great players, almost all of the great players, take divots target side of the ball. It's not because from the top they're trying to force the club head down or they're having the intentions of hitting down. It's because they're creating this impact position, which means that the golf club wants to be lower than the ground just post-impact. Now from here, what I'd love you to do is go ahead and just scrape the golf club along the ground, still feeling that pressure, and you should be able to scrape that golf club until it probably reaches somewhere level with the instep of your lead foot, and at which point you're going to find it starts to release. And when it releases, allow your body to follow. Okay, so you've got more rotation here. Let me just try that once more because this is a really key move. We go into our impact, we scrape the club, and then it releases, and we follow that with our body. And we get this beautiful sort of post-impact position where my elbows are close, my arms are extended, and my body is rotated. And if you look at the best ball strikers in the world, step number 2, we're going to put some movement into this. We're doing that kind of statically. We've moved from one to the other, but now we want to add some movement. And having a good quality strike with those irons is really all about, yes, having a slightly descending blow, as we've just created, but also making sure the club lands in the same place every time. Because I've seen lots of golfers, and this might be you in your game, who might hit 10 shots, and for each of those 10 shots, the club is always descending into the ground. But the club is landing at different parts or different points of the ground relative to the ball. And if that's you, you're going to be inconsistent. Even though you've got that downward hit each time, you're going to be hitting some fat, some thin, and then obviously some good strikes as well. So you can see what I've done here. I've taken a alignment stick and I've placed it behind my golf ball by around about 2 club head widths. It will depend on the club that you're using, but for a 7-iron, that's a really good guide. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your setup and you're going to go from setup into your impact position that we've just gone through. And then from here, you're going to make a little backswing move, really, really short. So hands only just outside thigh, club only just above my hands. And you're going to land the club and turn through. Now, obviously I did that without a ball. Little backswing, land the club. And notice when I've landed the club, I'm not stopping. I'm still continuing to turn through into this position. The last thing I want to do is feel like I stop my body and land the club, because that's going to cause my arms to bend, my left wrist to buckle. It's all because this stopped rotating. So we need to make sure, yes, we're landing the club, but we're also rotating out with our body to face the target. This is a really, really key point. So many golfers that I've helped over the years, when they think of strike, they're aware of attack angle and where the club should land, and because they're so focused on what they should do, we get these sort of impacts where they're like this, because they're stalling out their body because they're so focused on what's happening here. Yes, we want to be aware of strike, but we also want to be understanding that strike is just a point that we move through. It's not something we should be fixated on. So let me go ahead and show you what this would look like. I'm expecting these balls to go, 6 to 10 feet high, really quite low, and not, you can start to feel strike. Now, if you have a quick look here, I've bruised the ground. There's no divot, simply because my club wasn't really traveling at high enough speed to create a divot. But you can see that I'm starting to land the club and I'm starting to make a mark on the ground. That's really important. So let's go ahead and show you. Phase 3 is a little bit more difficult. As you'd expect, as we start to work through these phases, the challenge of striking the ball well does become a little bit more difficult. Here we're starting to learn how to move into impact. Now, for this little exercise, I like to do this initially without a ball, using one hand only. You're going to take a setup. Let's say lead hand only. Imagine there's a ball down there. And this time, I want you to keep this quite relaxed. You're going to make a little backswing. So you're going to move the club sort of back up this way so the club gets above your head and you've got a little bit of wrist setting here. Now from here, if I was to simply let that lead arm drop to the ground, my golf club is always going to land behind the golf ball. It's always going to land behind the golf ball. If it doesn't land behind the golf ball, it's because my lead arm has buckled or my left wrist has done something pretty weird on the way down. So your job here is to make a little backswing. Move the club down to the ground, but start to shift with your midsection and rotate. And as you do that, where the club hits the ground will start to move closer and closer and closer to the target. That's the key. So now what we're starting to blend is the fact that the club wants to go down to the ground and your body is going to help that contact move more towards the target. You can see where my club landed. So as I take a setup here, I just want you to watch me go ahead and do a couple of these. Just going to go backswing, let the club drop, control where it is with my body turn. Okay, let the club drop, control where it is with my body turn. Okay, if I turn my body too aggressively, the club landed over here. And if I don't turn my body at all, club lands back here. So in terms of strike, in terms of where that club lands, it's a blend. It's a blend of the club going down to the ground, which you always will do because that's where the ball is, and your shift and your body turn controlling where, relative to the target, that lands. Now, I said you're not going to hit balls one-handed. It's absolutely fine if you want to go ahead and do that. Let's give myself a fraction more room. So this might not be the best shot I've ever hit, but I'm going to go back, let the club drop, and turn and shift. And again, it's not a particularly usable ball flight on the golf course, but the strike was perfect. It came right at the centre, low ball flight, well struck. That is what we're after. So then you can start to put sort of two hands in, but we want the same thing. We want the club to go up above our hands. We want the club to work back down to the ground, and you're going to shift and you're going to turn. And when we do that, we start to get really good strikes. And there's no effort. It's not being rushed. I'm not accelerating the golf club. I'm simply taking the weight of the club, which I really feel down here, and I'm starting to just sense where that is in my golf swing. I'm starting to move it towards the ground, and I'm trying to control where it hits the ground by what my body's doing. That's what the great players do. That's what you can do with that little exercise. Once you've kind of mastered that stage and you feel like you can do that, we're then ready to kind of scale up to full speed. This last stage is when we're trying to basically put it all together and add a little bit of speed, a little bit of power, and kind of work back up to full speed so you're actually getting the distance off these really good strikes. Now there's two things that I've set up here. I've got an alignment stick in the ground, obviously there, and I've got a bottle down here. Now when I take a setup to this golf ball, I've still got my 7-iron. You can see just how I've set those up. The bottle is right outside of my trail heel, and the alignment stick is just out in front of my lead heel, and it's probably just over a hand's width away from my lead thigh. Now, in order to strike the ball well, what we've got to do, we've got to understand, and we've got to get our setup and our impact to be different. So here's my setup. Where would my impact be? Here. Notice I've moved closer to the alignment stick. When I do that, and I rotate through, my heel lifts, and I do not make contact with the bottle. Lots of the golfers that I've coached, and there's a very good chance you'll be the same. when they swing through, because the club has got some speed, they're always going to be rotating the body. But if you haven't shifted well enough, that rotation ends up being a spin, and you don't move closer to the alignment stick, and your heel starts to back up and knock the bottle over. So now we've got two really key points of feedback. If you hit shots from a station like this and this bottle keeps getting knocked over and you're finishing your golf swing and you're not touching this alignment stick, those are the signs that your body isn't working well enough and you're probably not landing the club in the right place, therefore your strike isn't as good. Okay, there's my finish. Look, I'm in contact with the alignment stick, bottle stayed in place, and if we have a look at the ground, the only reason I've got a bigger divot here than I had previously was because I had more speed. The impact was exactly the same, I just had more speed, more force, so when I created that impact, the club went down into the ground. Now let me just show you a demonstration of someone who potentially would have a poorer strike. And have a look at that end position. I'm absolutely nowhere near the alignment stick. Bottle got knocked over because I didn't move my body well enough. I didn't understand, or I didn't move from a setup condition, and I didn't move into an impact.